This is Back Roads of Illinois, server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. Today's edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by AgriGold. We were glad you're here on a Monday afternoon. I am Cesar Delgado. I am your host of today's program. We were talking about the biofuel industry in Iowa with the president of Iowa Renewable Energy Association, Monte Shaw. You can listen to our conversation with Monte Shaw on our YouTube channel. All right, we have a conversation with Monte Shaw from Iowa Renewable Energy Association about the biofuels industry in Iowa, what's new in the E15 for gasoline. We were talking about it with Monte Shaw from Iowa Renewable Energy Association. Welcome to the show, Monty.
Thanks for having me here.
Monty, let's start with our conversation about your organization for biofuel for Iowa. Could we talk about it for our audience?
Sure. The Iowa Renewable Fuels Association is just a fancy way of saying that we work on behalf of Iowa's ethanol producers and biodiesel producers. We also have members that, while not in Iowa, do produce, they have production in Iowa as well, but they also have production outside of Iowa for renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel. So a lot of interaction with farmers and farm groups that have shared interests. And we are an independent state level trade association, but given the impact of renewable fuels on Iowa, we spend a lot of time working on federal policy as well as our elected officials take a very active role and oftentimes are leading things. So the other thing I would say is there are groups similar to us. Obviously we're the biggest and the best, but no, there are similar groups in Illinois and Nebraska and probably I'd say 8 or 10 other Midwest states. So we also try to coordinate activities with those other states. And it's all about growing demand for biofuels and renewable fuels. It's all about trying to make, more consumer demand, open new markets here in domestic and internationally, as well as just anything we can do to help them run their plants more efficiently and more profitably, because ultimately that's going to help our farmers who are producing the corn and the soybeans and the livestock out there.
What is your thoughts on regenerative agriculture for alcohol, Monty?
Yes, we think it should be a big part of it. Right now, it's important for me to always start by saying that today's ethanol is low carbon. Compared to your typical gasoline, it's probably a 50% carbon reduction. So I don't want to ever leave the impression with an audience that ethanol is not low carbon. But in order to process ethanol further into sustainable aviation fuel, it needs to start out as not just low carbon, but ultra low carbon. And there's a number of ways we can get there. Some of the things we can do at the plant by becoming more efficient, using renewable inputs, certainly capturing and sequestering the carbon dioxide that comes during fermentation. But the number one place where we start with carbon is from the feedstock itself. So in this case, corn. So we very much are supportive of some of the efforts that are going on to allow farmers to be rewarded for producing lower carbon corn, which in turn would help us make that ultra low carbon ethanol that I talked about. So, some of the big ones are, using manure, nitrogen management, cover crops, but there's really dozens and dozens of practices that can help do that. Some have more impact than others. And so we want flexibility for farmers. Every farm is different. We want transparency for farmers. So we support what's called a book and claim method where they can certify their carbon reductions and then trade those directly with interested parties. And we think that a lot of farmers can take a carbon score on their corn that might be at like a 27 or a 29 right now on the carbon index and get it, below 10, maybe even below zero in some places where they're able to do multiple actions to reduce carbon. So the farmers need to be rewarded for that, and that's kind of what we want to see.
How important of the biofuel industry in Iowa?
Yeah, so I'm a little biased as I represent them, but we just think it's the real backbone of the entire economy here. Now, there's lots of industry in the Des Moines, the capital city area, and other areas, and manufacturing. There's lots of important things going on in Iowa, but it's really, as the Iowa ag economy goes, so does the entire Iowa economy. And right now, and for the last 20 years, livestock's an important part of that. Corn processing and soybean processing is an important part of that. Obviously, we export to help feed the world and different things like that. But it seems like those marginal bushels are going into ethanol plants. We're adding value to soybean oil by putting into biodiesel plants, renewable diesel plants. So while it takes all those different pieces of the puzzle to complete the whole picture, the ones that have really, in my admittedly biased opinion, that have been providing that marginal benefit, that last gallon that sets the price, so to speak, or that last bushel that sets the price, I think has really been driven over the last 20 years by the demand of renewable fuels. And so, depending on which year and which study, you're talking about tens of thousands of jobs, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 jobs are tied to renewable fuels. You're talking about 2 to 3 billion of household income, a lot of that going to farmers, and a big chunk of our GDP just directly tied right to biofuels. But I will tell you, I think we're going to have a report out later this week that shows those numbers have gone down. Now, not the production is still there, but when we're buying $7, $7.50 a bushel corn, those multiplier effects as that money, that income to the farmers rolls over in our economy is huge. Now it's 350, it's 450. So that's part of what we've been talking about is the need to grow demand. We're already starting to witness the as farmers continue to produce more corn, and we haven't been allowed to sell E15, or we haven't been allowed to have the tools we need to make sustainable aviation fuel. We're starting to see that supply go up, and with demand stagnant, that price has come down. We've seen that the last 2 years, $90 billion of lost farm income over the last 2 years, net farm income. That is devastating. And we've seen it in Iowa. I'm sure you guys have seen it in Illinois and elsewhere. John Deere's laying people off. Co-ops are laying people off. I mean, everybody, even the Firestone tire plant in Des Moines, Iowa, which is our biggest city, is laying people off because it makes agricultural tires. It's really sad to watch, and I really think we can turn this around, but we've got to get Congress to approve year-round E15. And quite frankly, we need states like Illinois and Iowa to embrace the tools we need, like carbon capture and sequestration, to unlock that giant sustainable aviation fuel market that we talked about. And instead, we see small but very loud groups of people really trying to prevent that from happening. And I think that's not a good sign for the future of agriculture, and hopefully we can prevail.
How is the planting progress in central Iowa with the rains, weather for right now, with a huge corn estimate from the Department of Agriculture?
Well, let me. I haven't got my planning report day, so I have not. I'll just be honest with you, I haven't tracked that. It was going very well ahead of the 5-year average as of this time last week. My family farm is in southwest Iowa, so about as far away from Illinois as you could get, I suppose, and still be in Iowa. But we're all done. We're not super big, so we can get it put in pretty quickly when Mother Nature cooperates. But it's looking like we had some rain last week, but the weekend was pretty dry. It's going to be pretty dry these next few days. I think you're going to see the vast majority of corn and soybeans in the field by this time next week.
What is your final thoughts about the biofuel industry in the future?
Yeah, I'm a glass half full kind of person. I'm an optimist, so I still think that some of the best days for agriculture are ahead. Right now, I do believe we're in a period where supply has outstripped demand a little bit, and we've seen the negative consequences of that in lower ag prices, lower farm income, and then the layoffs because farmers aren't buying as much new equipment and things like that. But in the 80s when we found our 1980s when we found ourselves in that when I was a younger kid, um, we really didn't know how to get out of it. There really wasn't a plan, and we struggled for 10, 15, almost 20 years until all of a sudden biofuels took off in the early 2000s and really powered us for the last 2 decades. I think the good news this time is, we need to be honest. We need to be honest that if we need to grow demand, we can't just sit here and assume that we can't go backwards into some of those bad times. If we let production continue to outstrip demand, we can. The laws of economics are pretty clear. But the good news is we have markets out there. We know about sustainable aviation fuel. We know about the demand for cleaner fuels on the marine vessels, which is another just massively huge market. Railroads, and I'll just end by saying that we have the tools to achieve those markets, but we need people to get behind growing demand and giving us the tools we need to produce the ultra low carbon that the world wants.
You mentioned that it's a pretty sad situation in Iowa, but agriculture is basic principles to us as a human being. Monty?
You understand?
Thanks, Monty.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't quite catch that last part, but yeah, I mean corn prices, soybean prices are not where we want them. But like I said, I'm still optimistic that if people will not get stuck in the past and not be afraid of new markets, we have opportunities out there that are bigger than anything we've ever had in the past. So I'm going to keep fighting for those and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
Of course.
All righty. Thank you.
Thanks, Monty. That's Monte Shaw from Iowa Renewable Energy Association for this afternoon on Back Roads of Illinois. Thanks to Monte Shaw from Iowa Renewable Energy Association for today's program. This has been Back Roads of Illinois. I am Cesar Delgado. You have a good day.